The 2023 NBA Draft is a very anticipated draft class, with multiple players that I think have elite upside, and even two that I believe have franchise-changing upside. I have decided that I'm going to make my first of 4 mock drafts for this cycle. The other 3 will be released at much later dates than this one. The second one will be released on the day that March Madness starts. The third one will be released on the day of the draft lottery, and the fourth one will be released right before the NBA draft. For this specific mock draft, I used a random order created by the Sim tool on Tankathon. I will only be doing the top 10 for this specific mock draft. This will be the only mock draft where I will be doing both of these things for. The other mock drafts will be based off the standings at the time, and I will do a full lottery for those mock drafts. The reason I'm using a random order for this mock draft is because it's still relatively early in the season, and it does spice things up a bit. Plus, I'm only doing a top 10 because it's early in the draft process, and I haven't made a mock draft video in forever, so I want to get back into it a bit before I go a full routine. So with that being said, let's get into the first overall pick, held by the San Antonio Spurs. I don't think this really needs much of an explanation. Victor Wembanyama is going to go first overall regardless of who has that pick. He's an absolute alien playing basketball. He's a transcendent talent, 7'4", 230 pounds with an 8-foot wingspan. He can create offense off the dribble like a guard or a wing. He's an inconsistent but high potential 3-point shooter. He can just shoot over most defenses, and he has everything you look for in any player that plays basketball, let alone a player at his position. I truly think if he hits his 100th percentile outcome, he will be unstoppable. He's a generational defensive prospect, elite shot blocker, and has high potential as a multi-coverage defender due to his high feel and his movement skills. And for San Antonio, he would fit right in as the franchise guy. And I think it would be cool if San Antonio got the first pick because Victor has connections to a Spurs legend, Tony Parker. Both of them being friends, and Victor played for Parker's squad for the season before joining Metropolitans '92. And Tony Parker has talked glowingly about Victor. But again, regardless, he's going number 1 no matter what. Now let's get to the second overall pick, held by the Houston Rockets. The one thing the Houston Rockets need the most is a point guard, and Scoot Henderson fits that description perfectly for what they need, and it's an easy pick to make at second overall. I've made 3 videos about him already, but to give you a quick rundown, he's a 6'2", 195-pound point guard prospect with freakish athletic gifts, incredible skills as a scorer and playmaker, a super high feel for the game, and every trait you look for in a potential franchise player. On top of that, he's proven himself at a super young age, playing in the G League. He scored 31 points against NBA caliber athletes at 17 years old in the G League last season. And if it weren't for the draft rules preventing him from entering the draft last season because he was too young, I wouldn't be talking about him in this video because he would be in Orlando right now if he was eligible for the 2022 NBA draft. Same thing applies to Wemby. He's one of the 5 best prospects alongside Wemby I've ever evaluated. And for Houston, it's a great fit and would solidify the need they have for a primary playmaking point guard because the point KPJ thing just isn't working. Scoot and Jalen Green would be easily the most athletic backcourt I've ever seen in the NBA and would be in discussion for most athletic ever. I think they would play well off each other, and this would be super beneficial for Jabari Smith Jr., who thrives playing off of playmakers. So the first 2 picks have gone pretty chalk compared to my board. And that's not going to change with the third overall pick held by the Orlando Magic. So number 1 on my board goes number 1, number 2 on my board goes number 2, and number 3 on my board is going number 3. Amen Thompson is an athletic freak. I talked about him in a recent video about him and his twin brother Asar, who, spoiler alert, is going to be picked very soon. But with Amen, you're talking about a 6'7" freak athlete with legit primary point guard potential. He utilizes his generational athletic gifts to do things as a passer that honestly I have never seen done before. He needs to work on his shooting ability. It's the biggest swing factor. He has put the work in. It's still a work in progress, but I'm not as worried about it as I once was. But his playmaking upside combined with his athleticism, feel for the game, and slashing ability are enough on its own for me to justify a top 3 grade like I have on him right now. For Orlando, it's a best player available pick. They are set in the front court with Paolo, Franz, Wendell, and Bol, who's emerged as a viable NBA player this season. And I like the guards they have, like Jalen Suggs, who's starting to show the signs of what made him a top 5 pick out of Gonzaga. Marco Fultz has looked pretty good since coming back from injury, and Cole Anthony has also looked pretty good since coming back from injury as well. But I just think the upside of Amen is too much to pass up on, even if I like the guards that they have. And I don't think there is a front court player we're taking at 3 right now. And the idea of Amen working in the PNR with Franz, Paolo, and Wendell, and even Bol, being a transition threat both with and without the basketball in his hands, and working off cuts to the basket, it could be really fun, and something that has a lot of potential with a bunch of tall guys that can play make. But that moves us to the 4th overall pick, held by the Detroit Pistons. This will be history for a few reasons. This will be the first time 2 twins go top 5 in the same draft, and the first time 2 siblings go top 5 in the same draft, at least as far as NBA goes. And it would be the first time since 2001 where the top 4 picks didn't go to college. Now, Asar is a similar freakish athlete to his twin Amen, but he's more of a wing connecting playmaker as a passer with more scoring aggression. I think he's a bit farther along than Amen as a shooter, but he doesn't have the primary creating upside, in my opinion. That's what separates the two. However, for Detroit, this is a BPA situation, and kind of a fit situation as well. They have a bunch of young talent like Cade Cunningham, who's unfortunately going to miss the rest of this season with an injury, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, Sadiq Bey, and even Killian Hayes, who's starting to figure it out. Asar is my number 5 guy in the draft, but I have a new identical grade with my number 4 guy, who we will talk about soon. But I think he's a really good fit with Detroit because of what he can do with and without the basketball in his hands. And I do think if the early signs of the jump shot are real and are sustainable that he's shown this season, he will be a top 5 lock. And now we will get to the final top 5 pick, which is held by the Charlotte Hornets. The first college player comes off the board at 5th overall in Cam Whitmore from Villanova. He's a freak athlete at 6'7", 225 pounds. On top of that, he's one of the youngest players in the class. I'm not saying he's Zion Williamson as an athlete because there's nobody that is Zion Williamson as an athlete. But his approach to the game as a power athlete is the closest thing I've seen as far as mindset as an offensive player to Zion Williamson when he was coming out of Duke. Cam Whitmore is not Zion, obviously, but he has one of the best second jumps I've ever seen. He's the best power athlete in his class. He has a great motor. He uses his frame to draw contact at a high level. He has high defensive potential, and he isn't a terrible shooter either. He's not a great one, but given his play style, I'm very encouraged by his confidence and the potential moving forward in this area. For Charlotte, this is a BPA situation. He's my number 4 player in the draft, and he has an argument to go number 4, maybe even higher than that, and he has a near identical grade to Asar for me right now. I just like Asar's fit with Detroit a bit more, but Cam Whitmore and LaMelo Ball will be a lot of fun, and hopefully this is the start of a bright future for Charlotte. Now let's move on to the 6th overall pick, held by the Washington Wizards. Nick Smith Jr. is a complete guard prospect. He's a wiry 6'5" combo guard that can legit play both guard spots. He can play both on and off the ball. He can pass, he can shoot, he can create for himself, has nuclear pull-up shooting potential. And for Washington, it's a BPA situation. And Nick Smith is BPA for me this year at number 6 overall. I know they drafted Johnny Davis this season as a 10th overall pick in 2022, and he's barely played. And I know Washington has a ton of guards already, but they've tried drafting the wings and the forwards a lot, and I don't think that any of them have been bad, but they haven't been great either. And I just feel like Nick Smith is a player that you take a swing on if you're picking in the top 6. Even in top 5, I would consider him maybe as high as number 3. I just think that his transition to the league is going to be so easy because his game is so translatable and he's so lineup versatile to the point where he can have an impact whether he's starting or coming off the bench. And I also think Bradley Beal being the guy the Wizards just gave $250 million to is a factor if he's on the board as well. Nick Smith was a standout player on the Nike EYBL team that Bradley Beal happens to have a formal partnership with. So they have a connection there. Again, it's early and anything's possible, but let's just say that this would be something that's very much in the cards if the Wizards are on the clock and Nick Smith is on the board. Let's get into the 7th overall pick, held by the Oklahoma City Thunder. This may be a shocking pick for some of you, or maybe a lot of you, but I have a top 10 grade on Jett Howard. He's a 6'8", 215-pound wing forward type. He's a great shooter, has an argument for best shooter in the class, can create his own offense at a good level, has good touch around the basket, great floater. One of the best floaters I've probably seen from a guy that's taller than 6'5". He's a good mover at his size. He can be a legit connecting, passing playmaker in my opinion. And I think he has good instincts on defense and can defend multiple spots. This is someone that would thrive playing off of guards like, say, Gilgeous-Alexander and Josh Giddey. And he can create for himself as a source of offense when those guys aren't on the floor. He's not someone I would give the basketball to all the time, like a Paul George or a Kevin Durant. Again, there aren't many players that are going to do that. But I do think he does enough on the ball to say you can give him opportunities when, say, Gilgeous-Alexander needs rest or Josh Giddey needs rest even. But he's somebody that just fits the mold of what a modern wing forward is. He can shoot, he can score outside of just shooting, good passing within the offense, and he is very versatile on defense. He's a high floor prospect that I think has a higher ceiling than most think he has, and I think he fits well with OKC. Again, I know this is high for him compared to where most have him, but I'm basing this mock draft and all my mock drafts off my draft board. And Orlando Magic is back on the clock actually with that 8th overall pick via the Chicago Bulls. Wow, that was an awful sort of transition. Let's just move on. Anthony Black is the definition of a connecting guard wing. He's an awesome defensive prospect with great lateral quickness. He plays well on that end of the floor, both on and off the ball. Active hands and makes good contests. He's a really good passing playmaker, both in half-court and transition settings. Inconsistent shooter, but I do think he's flashed potential off the catch, and I do think it's further along than I thought it was based off watching his high school tape. He's a capable scorer that's a good finisher around the basket, but his scoring aggression is not consistent. However, to me, that really doesn't matter too much because I think his defense and connecting passing have a chance to be special. And I think if it's realistic if this happens, I think it's not quite the same. But if you think he could be like Marcus Smart on offense, which is a really good passer, not the most consistent scorer, but can take over at times and does enough as a scorer on offense to fit next to high-level players. And in this scenario, he'll be playing with guys like Victor Wembanyama, Franz Wagner, I almost said friends, Franz Wagner, and Paulo Banchero. So he's not going to be asked to do too much outside of his comfort zone. And as an energy connecting playmaker that can play great defense, you look at that profile, and that's something any team could want and could use. And that's what Anthony Black is. Now let's move on to the 9th overall pick, held by the New Orleans Pelicans via the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm not comparing him to either of these players, but Keyonte George's shooting numbers remind me a lot of Cam Thomas and Anthony Edwards' shooting numbers when they were in college, where the numbers don't fully reflect what kind of talent they are as a shooter, because Keyonte George is shooting below the NBA league average for 3-point percentage as a freshman at Baylor right now, but I still think he has an argument for being the best shooter and maybe the best pure scorer in this draft. Again, I know he's below average from 3, but he has a very good shot profile on tape, both on and off the ball. He's a confident, high-volume shooter, and I think the shots will fall eventually. He can score both on and off the ball. He has a lethal pull-up shooting potential. He's shown potential as a passer, which is encouraging because you usually don't see guys with his scoring profile be this far along as passers. He's a physical player who is a lot stronger and is honestly someone that weighs more than his 185-pound listing suggests. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's just hard to watch him play and believe he's only 185 pounds. He's built like a linebacker. And I think for New Orleans, there isn't a big at this point in the draft worth taking this high, in my opinion. And if you get a guy like Keyonte George who's super talented, and have a guy like CJ McCollum mentor him, and CJ McCollum's one of the best offensive players as far as shot creating goes for his generation, I think that's something that can be beneficial both in the short and long term. With that being said, let's go on to the 10th and final pick of this mock draft, held by the Miami Heat. I think there's a real chance Dariq Whitehead ends up going much higher than this. I think there's a real chance he ends up falling a lot lower than this. If he shakes off the rust and his most recent game is a sign of things to come, I think he's going to get back into that top 5 caliber range that most people, including myself, had him in going into the season. But he's had a slow start due to coming back from a foot surgery. His finishing hasn't been at the level you expect from a 6'7", 220-pound wing the way he is. I do think it's just a lot of rust from missing the time with injuries. I'm willing to bet on the shot creating upside, his athleticism, and all that potential on both ends of the floor. Plus his mindset and the way he thinks the game is just hard to bet against when you have as much talent as he has. Writing off an 18-year-old that won't turn 19 until after the 2023 Summer League because he's had a slow start coming back from a foot injury would be foolish in my opinion. But at the same time, I do think we need to see more from him to say that he is not only a top 5 guy maybe, but a top 10 guy even, because if it is like real and the injury has affected him and he's just not a good finisher and he just doesn't look in control the way he has at times, I don't think he's worth taking that high. But I'm betting on him getting back to the form, and I think he's talented enough to get back to the form, and I would bet on him getting back to that form, but again, have to see it first. And if the Miami Heat can get a guy like Dariq Whitehead, that's a perfect situation for both teams. Miami is a great team when it comes to developing players that they draft in the lottery, and I do think that, looking at this pick, it kind of personifies what this video is, because a lot can change, and this pick is the definition of a lot can change, because where Dariq goes can change a lot from now to when the draft rolls around. And where Miami is picking in the draft can change a lot between now and when the draft rolls around. We just don't know which one it's going to be. Now, I know I am only doing the top 10 for this mock draft, but there are a few other names that I do want to talk about that didn't get picked. Some of them that may shock you that it didn't go in the top 10 of this mock draft, and some of them that may not shock you, but I do want to talk about them regardless because they would definitely be in contention for top 10, or at the very least, they would have gone in the later lottery section if I did a full lottery. Cason Wallace, the point guard out of Kentucky, in my opinion, is the best defensive one-and-done guard prospect of the last 10 years, and I think he has a chance to go top 10. I have a top 10 grade on him, actually, but he kind of reminds me a bit of Jalen Duren from the 2022 draft. Not the same player by any stretch of the imagination. One's a guard and one's a big, but the same way I had a super high grade on Jalen Duren, I actually had a top 5 grade on him, but I understood that there was a real possibility that he does go lower than where he was on my board, and I feel that same way about Cason Wallace because I think both of them are prospects where the fit does matter, and I do think that landing in the right situation is a real factor, especially in the top 10 when you have prospects that have similar caliber grades compared to him. But I think he's a very good prospect. I think there's a chance he goes top 10. I think there's a chance that he goes even higher than that, depending on what team's picking. But he did end up falling out of this mock draft. I considered him at number 10 for the Heat, but I still believe in the league's upside a bit more. But yeah, that's why he didn't make it. But he probably would have been the 11th overall pick if I were to extend this to the lottery. Now, I know you guys are probably wondering where Brandon Miller is, because that's the name that everyone seems to have going in the top 10. And I like Brandon Miller. I don't have him going top 10, obviously, because he didn't go in the 10 picks of this mock draft. But I will say this. It has nothing to do with his age. I don't think his age is a factor in why I didn't have him going top 10. In fact, I know it wasn't a factor in why I didn't have him going top 10. Because to me, the whole age thing with him is overblown. Is he old for a freshman? Yes. He was born on November 23rd of 2002. Actually, my bad. November 22nd of 2002. 1 day off. And I know, yes, that's old for a freshman. There are guys that are also freshmen that are a full year younger than him. But for me, he would still be true sophomore age if he was a part of his recruiting class from last year with a bunch of guys that were also born in like 2002, 2003. Because he's not that much younger than Paulo Banchero, who went first overall in this class. So I still think it's that big of a deal. He's going to be 21 in his rookie season. I don't think 21 is an age you can look at and be like, oh, you can't take this guy in the top 10 because he's going to be 21 as a rookie. Like 21-year-olds are fully developed NBA players that don't have room to grow. So I don't think that really matters as much as people are saying. The reason he didn't go in the top 10 for me is I have concerns about his limitations. I think that his finishing ability and the shot creating are not good. The numbers aren't good, and I just think that might hold him back a bit, because those are sort of swing factors you look for in top 5 picks, and whether they can be a star or not, and he just doesn't have that right now. But for me, I still think he's a lottery talent based off of his shooting ability. He has an argument for best shooter in the class. His athleticism is really good as a guy in transition, and he's a pretty good defender as well. So for me, he doesn't go in the top 10. I think he could go top 10. I would feel even comfortable like as early as 7 or 8 in this draft. And in fact, I considered him at 7th overall to OKC. I just think that Jet Howard is a bit better of a prospect as far as an offense, is a bit more complete as an offensive prospect and overall prospect to a certain extent. But Brandon Miller is a really good prospect. I would take him in the lottery. I think late top 10 even. But I can't quite get with the top 5 sort of hype that he has right now, because his swing factors of finishing and shot creating just aren't there. But again, I do think he's a very good prospect and would go top 10 in most other years, but this draft class is pretty loaded. G.G. Jackson from South Carolina is another lottery guy for me. He's a 6'9", 250-pound power forward, the youngest player in the draft. He's 17 at the time of me recording this video. He actually turns 18 in a few days, but he won't be 19 until a few games or a few weeks, and actually like a month into his rookie season, now that I think about it. But he is definitely a lottery guy. Definitely someone I considered in the top 10. He has work to do. He's not a complete player yet by any means, but some of the stuff he does as a shot creator at 6'9" just is insane to watch. And I think the sky's the limit with him, but I think there is a lot of work to do with him as well. But I would take him lottery just based off his shot creating upside at that height and that young of an age alone. Gradey Dick is a great shooter, arguably the best shooter in this class. I think he is better in other areas of the game than he actually gets credit for. I think he's a pretty good finisher, especially in transition. I think he's a better athlete than given credit for. I think that he's a better shot creator than given credit for as well. And someone that I think late lottery, top 15, maybe definitely a top 20 lock. I almost said maybe. He's definitely a top 20 lock just based off his baseline skill set alone. The one area that I am very worried about with him is defense. He is not good on defense, doesn't have good screen navigation, kind of looks lost out there as well. And it's an area that can improve, but I think my concerns with it go a bit farther than just the typical freshman struggles. But regardless of his defense, I think his talent as an offensive player is enough to maybe flirt with late lottery and maybe even late top 10. We'll see how the season plays out. Kansas is a great team. They're going to look to make a deep run in March. And who knows, maybe he goes up higher on my board based off how the rest of the season turns out. Again, it's super early. These guys have played like 10 games at most. So a lot can change between now and then. The only thing I think is pretty locked in is who's going number 1, who's going number 2. The final guy I'm going to talk about that didn't go in this draft is Jarace Walker. I would have had him going in the lottery. I considered him for a few of these teams in the top 10. I love Jarace Walker as a prospect. He's my favorite prospect in this draft, personally speaking. Not the best, but he is my favorite early on. I've been watching him for years. First time I saw him in person, he was 15 years old at the Hoop Hall Classic. He was on the IMG Academy team that won Geico Nationals. That team had future NBA guys like Josh Green, Jaden Springer, who hasn't really played in the NBA, but he did get drafted, so I consider him an NBA guy. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, who's been really awesome for OKC. Noah Terranova when he was a big-time prospect. And Jarace Walker was a freshman on that team. And I remember asking when we were watching IMG play at Hoop Hall, where's he going to school? And I found out he's a freshman and 15 years old. And I was shocked because I thought he was a senior or a post-grad player because guys at 15 years old aren't supposed to be built like that. He's built like an NBA player. And his skill has improved as the years gone along as well. And I think he's a high motor guy. He's a smart player. He can pass. I think there's more scoring potential than people will believe because he only averages like 9 points a game. But you have to remember, on the best team in the country as a freshman. But you see the physical tools, you see the passing potential, the stocks potential, you see the high motor in the rebounding, and you see a player that honestly on another team might be averaging a few more points per game, and maybe those scoring concerns aren't as brought up as much, but I think he's going to be a great player in the NBA as far as someone that's going to last for a long time and have an impact, and I think that he's going to be a lottery guy. I think he could sneak into the top 10 as well. But that's the end of this mock draft. This is one of the longest videos that I've ever made on this channel. So, actually, it might be the longest video I've ever made on this channel. But I hope you enjoyed. I know that you guys are going to complain in the comment section. I know how this goes with mock drafts. I made enough mock drafts on the other channel prior to launching this down to know how the comment section is going to be. So, feel free to disagree in the comment section below. I know you guys are. But, again, it's early. Things are bound to change. By the time you see my next mock draft in March, things are going to change. The order's going to change. The prospect order, likely outside the top 2 in this class, might be changed as well, but we will see. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like down below. I'd really appreciate it. It helps you with the algorithm. With that being said, have a nice day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.